I am waqas, abdullah, and you're watching my show. As every country in the world develop why they want to be a nuclear state, what is the reason for this thinking? There is a thought that not only in a developed countries, but also in a developed country that has nothing to feed its people, it wants to be a nuclear power. Why do so many countries spend money on a weapon, insist money spending on a hospitals or on a public health sector or education for the people? We have many examples like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After all, despite these threats, why every state want to be a nuclear power? The topic we will be talking about today, it is the countries that have become or want to become a nuclear power. The topic of discussion is a nuclear state versus nuclear states. Today, joining us, our knowledgeable guest, Dara from European Union. Thank you, Dara.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me.
Anna from Russia. Thank you, Anna.
Yes, hello, everyone.
And Yukti from India. Thank you, Yukti, for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
Thank you. I would like to start with you, Daira. Can you please highlight the Iran issue? As we can see the US extensions on that. So what can we learn from the case of Iran, which is after all the claiming to only persuade the civilian nuclear energy? What is your analysis on that?
Yes, so about Iran, well, first of all, about the United States withdrawing from the deal and then Iran threatening to withdraw as well, we can learn that the nuclear issue, the issue of nuclear weapons is really, it cannot be assigned to one particular country or one particular area. It's really an issue that involves everyone, just like the issue of climate change. And therefore, this is why, for example, the EU powers, the European Union, were really trying after the withdrawal of the US to keep the deal alive. And because if Iran is a threat, then it's a threat for everyone. And this is why we should not, we should really not think of it in terms of a fight for power or a certain competition, because this is what the nuclear issue does. It's really put, everyone is vulnerable, and there is no more, it's not important how much nuclear weapons, how much warheads a state has, because as long as another state has the atomic weapon, it doesn't matter the number of weapons, it can cause damage and it can cause deadly damage as well. So what we can learn from this case is that, well, we really have to reconsider the way we treat countries, especially traditional enemies like Iran and the United States. Something really has to be reconsidered on both sides, but especially on the United States side, since they're the one who withdrew from the deal. And we have to really put some effort into concealing the differences, even if there are some tensions, some really like history-long tensions. It really has to, there really have to be compromises to be made, because yes, for example, if Iran, now that Iran is maybe like threatening to develop the nuclear weapon, you know, now Saudi Arabia is as well saying that, well, if Iran gets the nuclear weapon, there's no reason for us not to get one. So yeah, this is really a butterfly effect, a snowball effect. And I think, yes, what we can learn is that everyone has to put their differences aside and get along when it's about the future of the whole humankind, you know.
Okay. Anna, my question is to you. What do you think about this? The Iran, when the Iran become the nuclear weapons, as we can see, we can read the era of the Donald Trump, and we will also be in a Joe Biden. So what is the differences between, because we can see the different things will be happen, and why we have we can see the different attitudes of the both presidents according to the Iran.
Yeah, I think it's actually a very interesting topic, and I also wanted to add in the beginning that, like, first of all, Iran's interest in general, in nuclear technology, it dates back to the 1950s. And in that period, so the country was ruled by like Shah. It was almost very like similar to monarchy. And so Iran basically received technical assistance under the US Atoms for Peace program. So we can say in the 20th century, in the beginning, the United States actually supported the Iran's nuclear program. But so it was peaceful nuclear program, of course. But then after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, so Iran remained interested in nuclear technology, but the relations between US and Iran worsened. And so now we are living like in this situation, and Daria already mentioned, so the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was signed by like European countries and the US, and then on the 16th of January 2016, so United States like decided to leave the treaty when like Donald Trump became like the president. So they announced that they are leaving in 2018 officially. But right now we see like the political change in the US, and they have a new president, Joe Biden, and of course he's like very different from like Donald Trump, and he also wants to show that he's different, that his political course is different. And he talked a lot in his like immigration and in general his like political campaign. He talked a lot about Iran, and that it's very important to continue negotiations with this country, because also, as we like have seen, when the US decided to withdraw from the treaty, Iran also like mentioned that the country will stop committing. Yeah.
Okay.
And so yeah, for now, what will happen? I think it's like very difficult, even with these good intentions. That like Joe Biden has to really change the situation right now, because Iran wants more, and as I mentioned, first of all, they want like other countries to lift their sanctions, and only after they will be ready to stop like their nuclear program. But the US and for all the officials, they want Iran first to stop their program, and then they say we will lift the sanctions. So I think like right now it's like, I don't know, closed circle, and it's like very difficult for like both parties to like make this like first step and improve the situation.
Yukti, as we know that in the past decades, that India have the good relation with Iran as well. So as we talk about the Iranian nuclear weapon, so what do you think about why the USA imposed the extensions on the Iran? Because the America has already a nuclear state.
Okay, so about India's relation with Iran specifically, yes, India has had good relations with Iran, which relatively has gone sour in the recent times because of India's getting closest to US, and US kind of pressurizing India to put sanctions on Iran, because till like I guess a few years back, India was able to trade well in oil with Iran even without the sanctions, despite US pressure. So yes, from what I can understand is that Iran is the location of Iran is in a very sensitive area geopolitically speaking, because like it's a neighboring country of Afghanistan, and it's a gateway to Central Asia if we see from the eastern side, right? And also, if we see the dynamics in the Gulf region, Iran is kind of like a loner compared to other areas, other countries of the region. And US has allies like Saudi Arabia and others, which are oil-rich countries. And Iran's interest and political ideology, perception, kind of, this is what I think, that it is kind of different from these countries. And since USA's interests primarily lie with the geopolitical advantages and the resources, which comparatively Iran does not have much to offer as compared to other countries, since due to its geographical location. Therefore, I think that that is why it is trying to isolate Iran, also because due to the fact that Iran is not exactly complying to its policy the way it would want. So, yeah.
Dera, why do some countries, such as Brazil and other, now want to be a nuclear energy as well? Gulf as working on that. So why are we still want to be a nuclear state?
Yes, this is a great question. Well, actually, as I mentioned previously, in the case of Saudi Arabia, for example, it's clearly because there is a regional threat. So they want to get nuclear weapons, not necessarily to use it, but just as a deterrence tool. So, for example, to prevent the other country from threatening them to use the nuclear weapon. It's always about let's say, having more, or at least having as much leverage as the other country. And then for some other countries like Brazil, well, officially, Brazil has just, let's say, been more open to the idea of the civilian use of nuclear power, which is, in the eyes of many experts, it's kind of the first step to then undergo actual nuclear weapons. But in the case of Brazil, in the past, after the military government in Brazil, Brazil really ratified a lot of treaties about the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. So I think there's a good chance there's a high probability that Brazil actually respects those treaties and does not acquire a nuclear weapon. But it is true that for everyone hearing that a country that is maybe a big country, a powerful country, is interested in nuclear power, it always sounds like a threat. So yeah, that's the case for Brazil. But apart from that, so far, it seems like, for example, in 2020, Honduras signed a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And so that was the 50th state to sign, which means that this treaty has to enter in force this year. So actually, I would say that on the global scale, so far, it doesn't seem like a lot of non-nuclear powers want to suddenly become nuclear. But I mean, to be continued, honestly, to be continued.
Yipti, what is your take on that? Why the every state want to be a nuclear state? As we know that the disadvantages of the nuclear state as well, and the nuclear weapon, as we can see the Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
About Brazil in particular, I will say it has a lot to do with the political leadership, according to me, because seeing the current leadership Brazil has and seeing their move so far, for example, made high level of deforestation in the Amazon region in order to have more land for industrial purposes or residential purposes, whatever we want to say. So I think for many countries, not all, for some countries at least, nuclear power is not only as a tool for deterrence, like Daya mentioned, but also a way to show that, I have strength, don't mess with me, to put it simply out there. So to show the prowess of a country and the strength of the country, countries which have that ambition, I will say, are going in the context at least, that they are going ahead with the nuclear energy expansion, even though it might not be sustainable for the economy or even in the environmental sense. So that is my personal take on it.
Okay, Anna, you would like to add something?
Yeah, so about Brazil, I think it's also very interesting, and I agree with everything what Dari and Yukti already mentioned. But yeah, I also want to say that I think right now internationally, Brazil really works to keep its reputation as a responsible player among institutions for nuclear non-proliferation. But we also saw that when President Bolsonaro came to power, they started changing their narrative about nuclear weapons, and he also started developing like nuclear sector and like stressed the importance of nuclear deterrence. And I think it clearly shows that sometimes the situation with nuclear weapons and with the development of nuclear programs is very like dependent on lethal power. So yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Yupti, how can they perceive the contradiction between the fear of the nuclear anarchy among the states and the non-state actors as well? Because we know that the non-state actors play a very essential role in the contemporary time, such as the terrorist network on one hand, so increased call for the more civilians using the nuclear weapon on the other be resolved. What do you think?
Sorry, I'm very confused. Yeah, I agree with the fact that, if we see the international law structure that we have and the international organizational structure, it is not adept enough to be able to solve the question of non-state actors being in possession of nuclear weaponry. Not, I mean, even they are not even adept for the conventional weaponry. Nuclear weapon is another level. So, honestly, the states, when they are becoming nuclear, when they're becoming nuclear powers, they're still accountable to be, for what use they're doing it, because they are on check all the time, not by in the liberal perspective by the organization and also by the nations and other organizations like that. But on a more realistic sense, they are also in the constant threat that, if they attack, others also have the power to attack them. So the damage is too great to be able to use the nuclear powers in terms of the state actors. But non-state actors don't have any restriction like that per se, especially if they don't recognize the international law structure and international organizations. Therefore, that is a very problematic area according to me, and that needs an urgent solution. And that would need a proper cooperative framework to be able to bring these people on the table and work on a mechanism in which everyone is coming together and working on it.
Okay. Daira, questions to you. Why are the nuclear weapons so attractive to so many non-nuclear weapon states? Why that?
Yes. Yes. So, once again, it has to do with, we mentioned two things. We mentioned the competition for power and also a sign of leadership. It is true that as long as the main nuclear powers that we have today, as long as they keep the nuclear arsenal, it will always be tempting for the non-nuclear states to develop their own, because as long as some states have nuclear weapons and not others, and that means that those states can exert pressure of the non-nuclear state. No matter all the treaties that they have ratified, the reality is that the ones that can cause the most damage are those nuclear states. And therefore, it is quite natural that the non-nuclear state wants to take part in that club, because if some states keep their nuclear arsenal, why not develop our own? But this is kind of the problematic narrative and the problematic way of thinking that all the treaties so far have tried to conceal, have tried to change. But yeah, unfortunately, we still have a way to go in that area.
Okay. Anna, we can read in the contemporary times that every country want to push the nuclear weapon to a zero. So what is the reason? On one hand, every country want to become a nuclear power, and on the other hand, it talk to eliminating it. Why the country have different attitudes?
Yes, I think it's also like we have the situation when one country at the same time, as you say, can push like for zero nuclear weapons, but at the same time is developing its own nuclear programs. And I think why it's like that controversial and why we have these like different ideas at once. I think first of all, countries really associate still nuclear weapons with power, because as you know, even like the Security Council, 5 permanent member states, they have nuclear weapons, and only they have veto right in the Security Council, like the most important body of the United Nations. So I think it can be one of the reasons why different countries still want to have and like acquire nuclear weapons. But at the same time, for some countries, it's still a long way to go, and it's like very difficult in terms of technology to develop nuclear weapons. It's very expensive. So at the same time, they have their programs, but while they don't really have nuclear weapons yet, they also push for zero nuclear weapons, because for them, it's like the world is going to function if like everyone has nuclear weapons or if no one has them. So it's like this situation.
Okay, Yukti, what is your opinion on that? Why every state want to push now, right now, to the zero nuclear weapons game?
I think, like I mentioned before, many people symbolize nuclear power with, show of strength and power, and also a way to, kind of show to the rival powers that we don't mess with us, okay, kind of like that mechanism. So therefore, they feel like if they have the nuclear weapon, they will have a means to protect themselves better, or the other nations will not underestimate them. Like, for example, many countries in Latin America, like Chile, are nuclear-free areas, and they have signed treaties and all in terms of like not having nuclear weapons at the first place. But there are many countries, due to non-proliferation treaty or any other treaty like that, they have been restricted from producing nuclear weapons. So we saw the example of Brazil and also the Gulf region, where they perceive that there is a need for nuclear weapons in order to combat the threat that they have. That is, I think, the main reason why people, like the countries which are not nuclear powers, want to go for nuclear energy. And also, if we want to say in a more positive note, I will say the idea of nuclear energy being more sustainable compared to the conventional sources of energy is also what is attracting some countries to switch to nuclear power in order to lessen their dependency on oil and other resources like that. So this is what I think about it.
Okay, Dara, what is your analysis on that?
So obviously what has just been mentioned is really interesting by my colleagues, but I would also say that lately there has been a push, there has been kind of an imposed push on countries to question once again the possession of nuclear weapons, because as I mentioned previously, well, in 2017, after the tryouts of North Korea with their nuclear weapons, the world has kind of been a bit shaken. And so there was a treaty that has been created. This is Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. But of course, not a lot of states ratified it. And as all the treaties, it has to be ratified by 50 states in order to be active, in order to be to enter into force. And in 2020, so the 50th state, Honduras, has ratified the treaty, which means that it was supposed to, it entered kind of into force in January 2021, January of this year. Of course, a lot of nuclear states did not ratify it. So it's kind of, we may think, okay, so this is a bit useless, but still it has opened the discourse on that topic again. And most importantly, I think it has kind of shifted officially the narrative from nuclear weapons has only an effect on the state security, because it has shifted it to actually the human side of nuclearization. For example, there is an article in this treaty that is maybe one of the most important, I think, that deals with the human damage that nuclear tryouts can cause. And basically it calls state parties to put in place some kind of psychological support and also on the impact that on the environment that it can cause.
Okay.
So I think that now that clearly the global narrative is shifting a little bit towards the human side of nuclear weapons and the environmental damage, I think this is like a great push and an optimistic push for the states to, reconsider the zero nuclear policy.
Okay, we have last 10 minutes, so I want to ask you, because you all are representing the international community as well. As we can see in Afghanistan right now, the US is trying to eradicate the Taliban from last 20 years, and now Taliban eradicated USA from Afghanistan. So what's your take on Yukti? What is your analysis on that, the present situation on Afghanistan?
It's quite a chaos there, honestly speaking. Like, chaos is a small word for it, according to me. And the major concern is for the citizens there, like women and other people who are practicing. For example, people who are into music cannot practice their craft anymore because Taliban is shutting down the music schools as well in Kabul. And Kabul is the capital, so we can then only imagine what is happening in the smaller towns, right? So, honestly, USA did a big mishap when it comes to Afghanistan. I mean, I can't, downplay that. And yes, there is definitely a change which might be wanted by some or unwanted by some. That's another narrative according to me. But it doesn't really matter, according to me now, what kind of regime is there, as long as it is protecting the human rights of the people, like the basic rights, right?
Okay.
To be able to make their own life choices, for example, something as basic as that. If people are not able to do that, do a regime that is there, then it is a very problematic thing. Another thing that I will add here is that Afghanistan for a very long time has been that area where the conflict is happening, right? In whatever nature you want to talk about. But now what I think is not only the traditional sense of conflict, is there's another part of it, like the geopolitical interest now, because Afghanistan has a lot of resources like lithium and all, due to which countries like China would want to invest a lot in it without having any responsibility towards the Afghan people, like the usual policy China has when it comes to its economic interest. So,
Okay.
how different geopolitical players actually react to this and play their role really determines everything, because it's quite early to say anything for surety.
Okay. Anna, what is your analysis on that? The current situation in Afghanistan will be happening by the Taliban.
Yeah, I think it's like right now very difficult to say what will happen because even experts from over around the world say that for now we are not sure, because Taliban 20 years ago and Taliban now, maybe something really changed inside the organization. But of course, I think it will really complicate life of people there, especially the situation with human rights, with women's rights. And Taliban, of course, they say that they won't be that strict as 20 years ago, but some people say that it's only a manipulation, and when they really have all the control, they will do whatever they want. But I think right now it's actually for international community, it's a challenge, and we will see how countries can react, and the United States, because we still have some mechanisms like sanctions, for example, and the US now they have to figure out how they can still control maybe the situation or try to influence it, so people in Afghanistan still have their rights. Yeah, but I think it's a very complicated situation, so we don't know what will happen.
Okay, Daria, what is your take on that? Because Anna mentioned that this is a challenge for international community as well. So what's your opinion on that, the present situation on Afghanistan, and what's the international community play the role in Afghanistan in the current situation?
Right. So first of all, I mean, as it has been mentioned, I think we can all sympathize with the people in Afghanistan right now, because the future is really uncertain. And actually with Anna, with the work that we're doing in our organization, we had to we talked to some people from Afghanistan right now, and it's really, yes, the certainty is really scary. But I would mention that maybe if we can relate it to nuclear weapons, once again, one of the main threat that it created, especially, for example, the US, they became afraid that maybe the Taliban will have access to nuclear power, especially nuclear weapons from Pakistan. So it was all over the news. And of course, it's a very scary scenario, but we have to just remind the people that, because, for example, some people were imagining that maybe the Taliban will steal some nuclear weapons from Pakistan. And the thing is that nuclear weapons have this safing and these disarming systems that isolate the power sources in a weapon from all the components that will trigger the firing. Well, it's very technical, but in other words, you cannot steal a nuclear weapon, all right? Or you can steal it, but you will not be able to use it properly. You will not be able to fire it. So the only way that the Taliban ever have access to a nuclear weapon and are able to fire it, it would imply that the Pakistani government will clearly allow them to do so and clearly give them the weapons, which is, once again, unlikely because once a government gives a weapon to a non-state actor, there is no guarantee that this non-state actor will not backfire and the non-state actor will not use it against the people of that government. And so, well, but still, I mean, the threat is here. And I would say on the side of the international community, I think it is more crucial than ever to maybe, well, reconsider the, let's say, the cooperation regarding nuclear weapons and especially nuclear weapons, access of nuclear weapons to non-state actors, because as it has been mentioned previously, this is kind of a gray area in the international law, in the international legislation, because it implies very strong cooperation from all the countries in an area where most countries want to remain secretive. Most countries still do not want to let their neighbors have a glimpse and have access to information about their own nuclear arsenal. But I think just the example of the Taliban and the uncertainty of the situation should really make the states realize that, yes, it's time to put all of these suspicions, all of these mutual suspicions aside and try to, yes, work together to figure out a way, to make it safe and especially, to impede the Taliban from accessing nuclear weapons.
Thank you very much. I got to learn a lot by the programming with all of you, and I believe my audience too. Thank you very much, Daira, Anna, and Yuki for joining me. And thank you for your precious time as well.
Thank you.
Yes.